One is the interest rate on any investment anywhere with anyone going to do the exact same thing every year. Never. Lesson on the board today: defined benefit, defined contribution, and RMDs. So one of the things that I like, it's not really a thing that I like, but it's something that keeps the financial industry simple, because there are some complicated things for sure, but one thing that you see come up a lot is what something is described by its title. And so, you know, sometimes financial people will throw these terms out there, and it's just like a defined benefit plan. Like, am I supposed to know what that is? Is that a 401k? A defined benefit plan? But if you just stop and you pause for a second, if you look at the words individually and say what each one is compared to the other, it's like, oh, okay, that makes sense. So, defined benefit, what could that possibly mean? Or defined contribution. So defined is you're defining, you're putting a number on it, right? That's what you're determining. And so you're determining the benefit or you're determining the contribution. And so those are the different approaches to plans. So way back in the day, some of you would remember this, way back in the day, the primary retirement vehicle was a defined benefit plan. Meaning what? I start a job, and they had a pension. And how the pension worked is they basically told me, or I talked to people that had been there longer, and they knew exactly what they were going to get per month in a defined benefit. The benefit was defined to them. If you work here for this long, you will get a pension that will pay you this much per month. If you work for us for a little bit longer, that goes up. If you work for us longer, that goes up, and so on and so on. So how were they able to do that? Is that just some like magical thing? Was that a government plan? Was that just something that everybody had? Obviously, somebody has to fund that plan. And so what would happen is they would define the benefit, and give, or like a percentage of your income. And there have been a million different variations of how these have evolved over time, especially when they realized that the way that they were doing it didn't really work, or it was costing more than they thought. And so how it would work is, let's say that I get hired by a big company that's going to offer me a pension plan. What they would do is they would look at, you know, their budget, knowing that to keep me, one of the strongest things that they could do is offer me some retirement, a retirement plan of some kind as a benefit to me. And so let's say they're going to pay me a $50,000 per year salary, and that's going to be my gross income. What the company really is looking at is adding to that, if they are helping pay for my health insurance, that costs a certain amount per year as well. So let's say the part that they're contributing to that in that plan, that benefit plan in let's say health, life, dental, etc., is another $10,000 a year. And then based on performance, they're going to offer me, say, a bonus in there. So they want to add, you know, plus or minus 2 to 3%. And then obviously they know that in the future I'm going to get a pay raise, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so it's not costing the company $50,000 to employ me. It costs them somewhere in the range of like $65,000. Right? But then back when we're talking about defined benefit plans, what they would do is they have math, calculators, actuarial math stuff, where they can say, okay, here's this product. We need to put money into this for, minimum, a lot of them were like 20 years. If we put X into this for 20 years, how much would it grow to be at a predictable rate so that when they retire, we know what the total balance is at the end right here, so we know what Y is, or the danger was that they thought they knew what Y was going to be. Then, based on that and actuarial tables, we think they're going to live, and back then life expectancy was way shorter, so we think they're going to live to 70 years old. So if we can put in this much at this interest rate, or predicting the interest rate, will grow to be Y, so that we can pay them, what, Z per month, and make sure that it doesn't run out by age 70. So, what did they not figure into that? One is the interest rate on any investment anywhere with anyone going to do the exact same thing every year. Never. Does the bank pay a fixed amount for 20 years? No. Is there an investment that does that? Someone's like, well, what about a mortgage? What if I invested in mortgages? Well, good question. How many people do you know that have bought a house on a 30-year loan, never refinanced for 30 straight years, and made their monthly payment on time every single month, never moved, never refinanced, kept the same loan the whole time? I would safely bet you don't know one. You don't know a single human being that's been in the same house for 30 years on the exact same loan that they originally got. Because we're talking about 20 and 30 years. Now, are there people that probably got into a home, got a 5 or a 10-year loan, or maybe 15, kept the same one and paid it off? Maybe, but I don't know one of those either. Okay? I know people that have paid cash for a house. Well, that just gets it over with all at once. Right? So, there were some potential miscalculations in there. It's not going to do the same thing, the same interest rate for 20 years, so it's a little less predictable. Even fixed accounts, even fixed annuities, they'll change, right? What about that life expectancy? 70? Any problems there? Life expectancy is not 70 anymore. But back in 1940, 50, 60, when pensions were really popular, hey, people work to 60, they die at 64. We don't really have to provide that much. But because they're guaranteeing this payment for life, you've seen companies go bankrupt and employees suing their employers for mismanagement of the pension plan. But that was a defined benefit plan. Instead of selling you, which is the defined contribution side, instead of selling you this idea of you put in money, we match it, it was, at an unknown end. This they would sell the end, because then it would get people to stay with them longer, right? And of course, we've seen these go away. But a defined benefit is, here's the benefit, define it, and they created a plan to attempt, really, to make it work. Okay, defined contribution. How does that work? Defined contribution is going to be more commonly known as like a 401k, 403b, etc., where they're not telling you what your benefit is, they're telling you, defining what your contribution is. And so typically in these plans, it's not going to be a dollar figure, it's going to be more of a percentage of total income. Okay, it doesn't have to be a percentage, but you're defining a contribution. Someone could say, we're going to, put in, we're going to put in $5,000 a year for every whatever that you put in, or we'll put in $1,000 for every whatever. But it's usually a percentage of some kind where the employee, person number one here, the employee puts in X percentage, and then the employer, so person number two involved in the plan, is going to put in an equal or lesser percentage, and so they're defining the contribution. And so what that did is it shifted the responsibility from the corporation that was providing the pension or the defined benefit, and it shifted the responsibility onto the employee for obvious reasons. And so there's a lot. It's really interesting talking to people about this sometimes, is because they tend to get on the side of like that the employer is now the enemy. Well, they're not the enemy. It just got to a point where, because the market is so volatile and you don't know how long people are going to live, to continue making promises that mathematically are almost impossible to keep to the penny, they were losing. They were losing money left and right, and so they switched to a plan where, in my opinion, is better, because it made people have responsibility. Now, obviously, people would rather have this because they don't have to do anything. You know, welcome to America. I don't have to do anything. I just sign up and people give me stuff. And not saying that that was the mentality, but that's why it was like such a violent oppositional thing when companies switched to this. Now, if you took those exact same employees and forced them to start a business and told them which one to pick, well, they would totally change their mind. When people are getting handouts, they want the handouts to be as big as possible. When people are giving the handouts, it's a totally different story, right? And so it put responsibility on the employee not only to actually have to save money, heaven forbid they actually have to save money, darn it, but then it also really forced, and this is still something that people are learning since the 401k comes out in the early 80s, they're slowly learning that they have to learn. Darn it. Like, I'm going to have to actually invest some time and energy and money in learning how these work. Well, why can't my company just do it? Well, that's why they make a ton of money and you make a little bit of money. It's because they're willing to learn how to make a lot and just give you a little bit of it. And it's the same thing here. Learning how they work. And what's funny is a lot of the time people get to the point where they learn about their defined contribution plan and maybe they decide it's not the best thing for them. It's the best thing for the company because they get to deduct the whole match that they give you, aren't responsible for managing the money, and it's kind of the golden handcuffs in keeping people employed. And again, I'm not down-talking either one. This is just how they work. This is just what it is. Defined benefit, define the payment in the future, that monthly income, focusing on income, and then defined contribution is focusing on what I'm adding to the pile today. And so, of course, with some 21st century products, there's some that kind of combine both, where we focus, number one, on growing the pile, adding money, adding money, adding money, managing the money, lowest fees as possible for the best return possible, or at least paying a decent fee for decent returns or decent management anyway, because you can't necessarily pay for returns. I pay you this, you have to give me this interest rate. No. But then later in life, once the focus shifts from growing the pile to creating income, then people can, through some income planning tools, annuities, etc., they can then roll it something more back towards a personal pension style plan where that money that now they fund into the plan defines a benefit for them. So that's the difference between defined benefit and defined contribution. Okay, lastly, in just our last few minutes, because it doesn't really take very long to describe, is RMDs, or required minimum distributions. Okay, in a plan where we have tax-deferred growth and we got a tax deduction on the front end, you just have to think about it from the IRS's point of view. Okay, the IRS is just like a family. You know, they've got their family budget. They've got to have money come in so they can have money go out. Now, this isn't a political lesson, but in my opinion, there are too many government programs and not enough government systems to bring in more income, right? But that's not what we're talking about today. So what ends up happening is, so I'm 40 years old, let's say. I'm not, but let's say I'm 40 years old, and I'm contributing to a plan until I'm 65. Okay, every single contribution that I make along the way they give me a tax deduction. Okay, and this is going to be like 401ks, IRAs, simple SEPs, 403bs are going to be the most common ones, 457s, where everything I contribute is a tax deduction. So if I'm the person, you know, so here's me, do I benefit from getting a tax deduction? Yes. Does the IRS benefit when they give me a tax deduction? No, they don't. So they haven't got any tax money yet. Then, as the money grows, do I pay taxes on that? No. So do I benefit during the growth phase? Yes. Does the IRS benefit during the growth phase or the contribution phase? No. They don't. So what ends up happening? I get to age 65 and I retire. And let's say I've got other sources of income, real estate, a Roth IRA, I've got some annuity, I've got a pension. Like I've got all this money coming in. I've got this big balance in a 401k. Let's say I've got $400,000 in a 401k. But I don't really need it. Well, if I don't need it, and it just keeps growing with no tax, I'm not contributing anymore because I'm retired, right? So I'm not getting that deduction anymore. But when has the IRS made money on this? And I don't work for the IRS, but you just have to look at it from their perspective. Obviously, they want to get their money. So then, if the RMD didn't exist, you hit 72, 75, 80, and you still haven't taken any money out of this. So they're starting to get nervous. It's like, man, we need some money. So they have the RMD. At age 70 and a half, why half? Who knows? Maybe it was 70 and they sat around and they're like, well, that's boring. Let's make it 70 and a half. Who knows? 59 and a half, 70 and a half, whatever. So you start getting old. They think you're going to die. They want their tax revenue. So the RMD basically is a calculation that forces the money out of these qualified plans. Whether you want it or not, there is an amount that is required minimum distribution that you must take each year so that they can tax it, even if you don't need it. If you don't take it, the penalty for not taking it is 50% of what you should have taken, plus taxes on what you should have taken. So you start to do the math on that, you definitely want to take it. But here's the thing. Most companies, if you don't take it electively, a lot of them will just send it to you. Because you don't want to get into the game where you're like looking at the last 2 years and you're just like, oh yeah, I forgot. I needed to take that. Well, now you're penalized on a couple of years, and yeah, that's no fun. And so you have to look at it from that perspective. And so that's how an RMD works. We hit 70 and a half. They look at our qualified money, total qualified money, and then they come up with the total number that we need to take. And this could have been a lesson probably all on its own. Okay, so let's say I've got a 401k, I've got an IRA, and I used to be a teacher or something, so I've got a 403b as well. Okay, or from it could be that from several different companies, I've got 3 401ks. One sitting over there, one sitting over there, a couple IRAs here or there. But all the qualified plans, they'll each send you a letter the year that you turn 70 and a half that says the RMD from this account is $1,000. The RMD from this one is $1,200. Then the other company that you had the 403b with, they send you a letter that says the RMD from this account is $12,000 this year. And so then people are like, oh, it says required and it says $12,000, so they pull exactly the amount from each one that it says. Is that how you have to do it? No. What they do is they add up the total balance of all of them. And let's say, individually they obviously all have a balance, but all of them together add up to be $400,000. Okay? And no single one is worth more than $100,000, let's say. But all of them together are $400,000. I need to take an RMD based on $400,000 of qualified money, I don't have to take that amount from each one. I could take the RMD, let's say that it's going to be $16,000 or $18,000 is about what it would be if someone was 70 and a half and they had 400,000. So let's say it's going to be 20 grand. I need to take $20,000 in total RMDs, a little bit from here, here. I could take all 20,000 from the 403B, and it counts for all of them. Okay, again, it's like doing taxes. They don't really care that this money came from here and this money came from there. That's part of figuring out like all your taxes, but at the end, they're just looking at one number. Here's where it came in from everywhere, and you owe taxes on all of that number. There's going to be some deductions along the way and some tax-free income along the way. There's all this stuff, but when it gets down to that taxable number, you owe taxes on that number. You're not paying individual tax. Oh, well, this corporation has a tax bill of this, pay that, or this income has a tax bill of that. Paying it to different sources of income, unless you do have a whole bunch of businesses, right? They have their individual tax returns, but it can be all done at once. So that is our lesson on the board. Define benefit, define contribution, and RMDs. Thank you for joining us for class today. We look forward to having you back at future classes. Recommend, challenge, ask that you start sharing this with people that you care about. Help them learn more about money as well. Have an awesome day. We'll see you later. Class dismissed.